evening and welcome to the City Council regular meeting, and this is Monday, May 18th. And we will open the meeting with the city clerk. Please call roll.
Councilman Slater?
Here.
Councilman Abear?
Here.
Councilman Torgerson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Now?
Here.
And Mayor Fitch?
Here, and then please lead us in the pledge of allegiance and the invocation.
Bless those present, O Lord, that the business conducted here this evening will be for the continued betterment of our city. And in keeping with thy commandments, we ask in God's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, first, I'd like to make a statement from the governor pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020. Municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location and utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided in section 120-545B2 Florida statutes, for members of the council to appear remotely and also as a venue for public participation. While a quorum of council members are physically present for this meeting, along with a minimum number of key staff, we are following the governor's emergency orders and the city's emergency declarations by having less than 10 people physically present, and we are maintaining a distance of 6 feet between people and following other CDC guidelines for social distancing and protection. I'd now like to ask our city attorney to explain the procedures for public comment and participation in this meeting. Mayor Jane.
Thank you, Mayor. The following are the city's rules for using communications media technology as provided by section 120.54, paragraph 5B2 Florida statutes, as adopted by the City Council on April 6, 2020. This meeting is being streamed on YouTube Live and on the city's Facebook page. The agenda and backup material in the agenda packet are posted on the city's website as usual, and is set forth in the notice for this meeting, also posted last week on the city's website. Members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting were asked to review the agenda and submit their questions or comments on agenda items by email to the city clerk with their name and address and a reference to the agenda item on which they wish to comment. It was also explained in the notice that questions or comments on agenda items could be mailed directly to the city clerk's attention at the City of Gulf Breeze City Hall, 1070 Shoreline Drive, Gulf Breeze, Florida, 32561. The city requested that all correspondence be received by 4 p.m. Central Standard Time today, May 18th. So as we go through the agenda during this meeting tonight, the mayor will ask for public comment on the agenda item as usual. And at that point in the meeting, the clerk will read the questions or comments submitted, and the mayor and council members will then respond just as if the comments had been made in person. If there are follow-up comments or questions or others wish to be heard, those comments can be made by the public through YouTube Live by providing your name, address, and question or comment in the chat box, which will then be read and responded to by the council. Anyone who would like to participate during the public forum at the end of the meeting should also comment through YouTube Live with your name, address, and question or comment. Standard rules apply with the commenting through YouTube Live. So comments are limited to 3 minutes, and that any comments on an agenda item must be specifically applicable to that agenda topic that is being considered. Are there any questions on the process?
No, I think we got it. Thank you. At this time, we will have approval of the minutes, and that will be the May 4th, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Leslie, have we had any comments or emails regarding those minutes?
No, ma'am.
All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion, a second?
Second.
A second. Any comments or questions from the council? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next, we will move on to ordinances, and we will have first reading of ordinance number 01-2020. Leslie, would you please read that by title?
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance number 01-2020. An ordinance of the city of Gulf Breeze, Florida, amending the retirement plan and trust for the police officers of the city of Gulf Breeze, providing for severability of provisions, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, and providing for an effective date.
All right, thank you. Samantha, do you have any comments regarding this resolution?
I don't, I'm
Ordinance,
gonna ask if, Mary Jane Bass, city attorney, could give a brief recap. As I'm sure the city council recalls, this item was first placed in front of the council for consideration last January. There was some, discussion, understanding that this is a statutory requirement, but it was recommended by Mary Jane that the matter go back to the pension board, for a formal motion. That has been done, that's why it's back in front of you this evening, but just for memory refresher, I'll ask Mary Jane to brief you.
Yes, so under the Florida statutes, any state tax on insurance premiums that are collected within the city can be used to offset the city's contribution to the, police pension plan. And however, there are caps on that are determined, through the actuarial reports, and audits that are done. And so there's a limit on how much of a contribution or offset can be paid to the city for its contribution that matches up with the allowable contribution to the plan. Any excess premiums that are collected must be placed in reserves. And at some point, though, those reserves, they can't continue to build forever. They too must be handled properly and distributed, because again, they can't be used to offset what the city is allowed to contribute to the plan. Under the statute, there are options for that. We worked with the Florida League of Cities, who is our plan administrator, to develop the ordinance. And what was recommended is that we establish, in addition to the defined benefit plan that we have for our pension plan, that we also establish a share plan. And then the excess reserves can be distributed through that share plan in an amount that is allocated to all of the participants based on their years of service and their participation in the pension plan. The proposal went to the union for a vote. It was approved by all of them with specifics on the amounts that would be allocated and distributed to them. And then it went to the pension board, and the pension board is recommending that the council adopt this ordinance to amend the city's pension plan.
Thank you. Leslie, do we have any comments or questions?
No, ma'am, we've not received anything on this item.
All right, thank you. Council, do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
And we've got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments regarding this? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0, and we'll schedule the second reading, for this and hearing for this ordinance, next meeting. All right, our next ordinance is 07-2020, and that's the renewal of electric franchise agreement with Gulf Power. And this is the second reading of public hearing. Samantha?
Yes, City Clerk Leslie Geyer is going to phone, Gulf Power representatives, just as we did on first reading, just as a courtesy, and if city council or any members of the public, have any questions for the public hearing. So we'll just pause while she does that.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Rhodes, I just wanted to let you know you're on the line.
Good evening, how are y'all?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, hi, Steve. Thank you for phoning in tonight. At this time, we are ready. Wanted to see if we have any public comments or questions, Leslie?
No, ma'am, we've not. You want me to go ahead and read
Yes,
this?
please do.
Yes, ma'am. Ordinance number 07-2020, an ordinance granting the Gulf Power Company its successors and assigning an electric franchise imposing provisions and conditions relating thereto, providing for monthly payments to the city of Gulf Breeze, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances and resolutions, providing for examination of the franchisee's records, providing for incorporation into Appendix A of the city code, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
All right, thank you. Samantha?
Thank you. Mayor and council, there have been no changes since first reading. Just as a reminder, the electric franchise renewal highlights include that the term of the agreement is for 30 years. In September of 2020, the franchise fee would increase from 3% to 6% of monthly gross revenues produced from the sale of electric power within the city. Currently, Pensacola, Fort Walton Beach, and Crestview all have rates of 6%. Milton is currently negotiating a rate of 6%. They're currently 5%. The franchise fee renewal also places limits on Gulf Power's ability to interfere with pedestrian traffic and existing future drainage projects. And there's a late payment penalty clause if Gulf Power does not remit payment as scheduled. We did talk about first reading that there was a review of financial receivables at the commencement of the negotiations, and of course we find that Gulf Power has been very dutiful with those payments, but looking 30 years into the future, as there are corporate mergers that we anticipate are going to occur, that's looking out for the public's interest, obviously. Just also a reminder that what this really amounts to is that for every $100 of electricity that's billed for the average residential customer, there would be a $3 increase. What prompted the franchise fee renewal was the city's desire to underground utilities. And we talked at the last meeting about some of the specifics of underground utilities. This franchise fee represents a 50-50 cost share with community redevelopment dollars in your commercial area. So if this were not to be approved on second reading, then the council could move forward with undergrounding utilities within the commercial corridor, but you would not have a funding source for undergrounding utilities within any residential area. We also talked at the last meeting with the projection of revenues over 30 years, what sections could be underground within the residential areas. That would be your collectors. So we talked about if it's with the central nervous system, that would be your arteries. We have since had a meeting with Gulf Power. There's another one scheduled next week as we continue to work out the mechanics of a potential turnkey project and a design build. We're fine tuning that number, we're finding cost savings, and we're preparing for a city council work session, which you requested at your last meeting. And we'll talk about that a little bit further in the agenda, actually setting the date. So we're continuing to work out those specifics because we hear from you loud and clear that you want to maximize every dollar in order to ensure that we are best prepared for a natural disaster, that we best can bounce back when those severe storms when they occur. Currently, a third of our neighborhoods are underground, and so it is pretty easy for the mayor and council to compare those neighborhoods that are underground, which aren't, and when there are power interruptions. So we understand loud and clear.
Those available? Is there a printout?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And it's your newer neighborhoods, those that are built, from the late 80s, and more recently, the city, began requiring undergrounding, but your older neighborhoods are not. And so we will have workshops in the future to make sure that the public knows, just how that phasing would happen. And as I said, we're continuing to meet with Gulf Power to try to maximize that cost share. But approving the franchise agreement this evening still postpones that rate adjustment until September. And so it's, even though we're looking at an average, $3 a month adjustment per household to have citywide underground utilities, we still have postponed that adjustment until September, which will give the city more time and opportunity to make sure our residents are well aware of why you're doing this.
All right, thank you. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Okay, all right, thanks. Council, do we have a motion?
Move approval.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. What about questions or comments from the council?
Did we ever find out the responsibility of who would be from the pole to the house for services in the residential communities? I know there was some discussion at our last meeting in regards to that. And is that something that Gulf Power puts in and then bills the customer, or that be part of this, franchise fee to help offset those costs?
It isn't part of this adjustment, which, you know, we went to 6%, that's what was negotiated, and it's the regional average, but it would not be affordable. You would have to pick and choose one region of the city versus another. The map that is, over to your right shows that the existing plan outside your commercial area, what would be funded with this, ensures that your underground utilities along all your major collectors, so that you can then come off of those collectors, such as Shoreline, Fairpoint, and Daniel, and then underground within your neighborhood. So there would need to be a separate funding mechanism for that. When we attend Florida League of Cities, you know, conferences and FCCMA and talk with other communities, there is a, you know, a special assessment, there is a cost share that is discussed with residents. Before we have that conversation with you, we need to have more conversations with Gulf Power. What we do know is this represents an $18 million cost. So we're able to get $18 million of work done as far as we possibly can. And then once we know what that cost would be, even going so far as on private property, I mean, if that was the council's desire to pay even to the house, then you would have that same conversation that you have when you're looking at septic abatement. Do you want to take money out of reserves? Do you want to do a cost share with neighborhoods? So we'd be able to have that conversation more thoroughly during your workshops.
But typically now, the customer's responsible
Yeah.
for getting it from, you know, when it's underground.
Yeah.
But in case of a storm or something like that, and you're going back to try to restore it, would that be something that we would, just now, like, okay, now you have it available, we want you to put it underground?
Well,
That's something.
it'd be crazy if you had like a neighborhood that had potential to have underground in there, but you only had 50% of the people that were willing to pay to put it on the ground, and the other 50% still gotta go up on the ground back to a pole and then back to the house.
Mhm.
That would just be kind of
Feet first.
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It wouldn't do.
But to achieve the aim of resiliency, even in that scenario, what you have done by undergrounding the, you know, the major feeder lines along your highway and your collectors, you have still really driven down the likelihood of power interruptions. So and I'm speaking for Gulf Power, but I would think it would be a lot easier to address those connects to each individual house than it would be when you have, you know, power lines that have fallen along your highway or your collector streets. So.
I still think it's worth discussing and looking down the road as to
Finished product.
having a program, having a project to do the private residences, so forth, even if it's the owner paying a good portion of it. I think making it available is still something that should be looked at.
That would be consistent with what you've done with septic abatement, where you offer different opportunities related to cost share, grants, or otherwise. And so we can definitely establish a new program for that.
I've looked into the program for my own residents, and it's not that, it's not that expensive. It kind of depends on who digs the trench and who, you know, who does this and who does that, but there's a lot of flexibility in there, actually.
Okay. Good info.
Steve Rhodes, do you have any comment on what you're hearing?
That all sounds correct. As Mayor Pro Tem said, there are a lot of options for the services. You know, and of course, how you fund that or opt to structure the funding for those services would be up to the city, but there are multiple options for that.
That'd be something to discover in the workshop.
Yes.
All right. Okay, any more discussion or questions on this? All right, we'll take the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you.
All right, this time we'll move on to resolutions, and the first one is resolution 30-2020, and that's budget amendment number 2 for fiscal year ending 9/30/2020. City manager.
Yes, council, this comes ahead of your next quarterly financial report that we anticipate bringing to you at your second meeting in May. As you may recall, the procedure changed a few years ago. We used to not do quarterly budget amendments. We would wait until the end of the year, but that always caused a time compression for staff because our independent auditors would be here at the same time that we would be going back through mayor and council minutes and actions that you took and making sure that we were adjusting the books. And so now by doing this on a quarterly basis, it is a housekeeping matter. There should not ever be anything new. Certainly if it is, I mean, it's something where I would have individually spoken with each one of you before, but that's not the intention. The intention always is that this is going back and ratifying those actions that you have already taken. The first budget amendment was primarily a carry forward budget amendment, and so it was a little over $1 million, but it was those capital projects that we were right in the midst of, or we had just let, and so the finance department adjusted the budget to carry that money forward, which you had already encumbered for those purposes. This budget amendment is actually a reduction in the total budget. So once you look at each one of these, divisions, and these again should be very familiar to you, you remember the actions taken. But the sum total is that there's a reduction in the budget of $235,595. And so you have on page 55, the total revised budget after the amendment. The materials have been provided by your finance director. Ultimately, there's less than a 9% of the total budget from the adoption last year that changes to currently, and that primarily was because of carry forward projects or reclassification. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Leslie, have we had any public comments or questions regarding this?
No, ma'am, I've not received anything.
All right, council, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Yes. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions regarding this budget amendment? All right, hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. It passes 5-0. Next, we'll move on to resolution number 31-2020, and that's the temporary burn ban.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm just gonna give you a quick update. We thought this was an issue last week. It's not. More rain is expected. We're super pleased that we had rain this morning, and so we don't, at recommendation of your fire chief, we don't expect to have to take this up. We think that will at least be good for the next few weeks.
All right. Okay, so we don't need to do anything
No,
like
ma'am.
that tonight. All right, thank you. All right, next we'll suspend the city council meeting to convene as the Community Redevelopment Agency Board of Directors. And for that, we need to move for the approval of the minutes for the April 20th, 2020 meeting. And do we have any public comments?
No, ma'am, we've not received anything.
All right, thank you. All right, council, do we have a motion?
For approval?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions regarding those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Thank you. Is there any new business for the CRA? All right, no new business and no public forum comments, correct?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All right, we will adjourn CRA and reconvene as the city council at this time, and move on to consent agenda items. Are there any items that the council would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
I just was, I don't think I saw it in here. What is the completion date? Do we have, once they get the equipment, do we have an estimated completion date here, but
Or,
it sounds fairly urgent.
we're relating to the aeration, or we're talking about the aeration system. So they're, staging for that now, and so it is stressing. And then included in the agreement is the service, which will be, it's a maintenance service, that will be, assessed quarterly. And that's the $198 per quarter. So it is fairly urgent. We, started having an algae issue at the end of February. That has continued. I was out there touring the facility last week, and essentially we're talking about the pond, by the wastewater treatment plant where the treated water goes. We know how important that is for our reclaimed customers, also for the East Golf Course and our own irrigation needs. And so we've been taking protective measures, but we just have to be more aggressive. Again, the great thing with the rain is that we're diluting those nutrients. And so I woke up this morning and my first thought was the wastewater treatment plant. I called Jason and he was doing a hallelujah. So, but already we're starting to see, some improvement. Lake doctors, knowing this was on the agenda, worked with us throughout the weekend. So they're already, being pretty great with, staying diligent. They're just testing some areas right now, but we're feeling optimistic.
All right, that sounds good. And they already work for, the traffic one,
Yes.
so, yeah.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, so, any other questions regarding the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, we will take a vote. Yeah, we'll take a vote. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Oh, okay.
I think we're waiting on Tom to do the motion.
Oh,
For approval of,
oh, yeah, that's right.
consent items alpha and beta.
All right.
And I'm sorry that this isn't longer.
Thank you very much. How could I have forgotten that?
Second.
Okay, we have a second.
For A and B. Yeah, A and B.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. All right.
Abigail and B.
Passes 5-0, that, consent agenda. All right, action items. We are gonna move one of the action items up to the front, and that's the Gulf Breeze Sports Association request to open parks for Little League baseball and softball. And so Samantha, would you like to start with that?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a recap and talking with the city of Pensacola, the city of Milton, and Santa Rosa County, just so that you're not having a discussion within a bubble. And then I'm going to actually get up and cede my chair to Ron Cooley. He does have a separate GBSA meeting, I think. Is it GBSA your meeting tonight? Shortly. And so we're definitely going to make it late for it, but that's okay. So I'm going to be, pretty quick, but did want to share these things with you. As of today in Santa Rosa County, there are 183 COVID cases. Of those, 147 resolved positively, which means that people are getting, or they're considered well. 9 were deceased. 11 are active in, active cases, socially isolated, and 16 are in the prison. Interestingly, of the 16 in the prison, they are all asymptomatic. Milton recently had a testing site. 43 were tested. Woodlawn Elementary is going to be set up as a testing site this Thursday, and I've coordinated with the Department of Health for Gulf Breeze to be a testing site this Friday, which means that they're going to set up with a tent so that you can have motorists drive by, you stay in your car, it's a nasal swab, but it'll make it convenient for our citizens, but also our employees. And so the first 2 hours in the morning are primarily for employees and employees' families. And we'll get a notice out to the public about the times. And then the last 2 hours will be encouraging any member of the public who want to attend. There's also in front of you the Airbnb plan that was drafted by Santa Rosa County that was sent to the governor's office. And talking with the county administrator, it's anticipated that either the city of Gulf Breeze can do nothing, in which case this would, address Gulf Breeze as well. But that if you wanted to do something more restrictive, Santa Rosa County has welcomed you to consider that in the future, understanding that Gulf Breeze does not operate the same as Navarre Beach. And so it's just, if you want the county's plan to speed or if you want to adopt your own plan as it relates to Airbnbs. And so I leave that with you just for you to review. The mayor can certainly consult with the city attorney and do an emergency declaration between now and your next meeting, or you may want to hold an emergency meeting, but this was provided to us just merely an hour ago. And so I wouldn't expect you to deliberate on that. I'm just sharing that for your information. Milton recreation fields are closed. The fields are open and the skate park is open. Organized athletics are canceled until July. The splash pad is closed at least until Memorial Day. They do plan to hopefully open that Memorial Day. By comparison, in Escambia County, they have already opened for baseball and softball. Pensacola today announced that the city pools will reopen to 50 visitors managed by YMCA. May 30th will be the official start date for youth baseball and softball. The city of Pensacola on May 1st reopened playground equipment, basketball and tennis courts. You had discussed that at the time, and of course, Gulf Breeze had never entirely closed. You took a bit of a different approach to the governor's order, and you have redeployed parks employees to be park monitors in order to communicate CDC recommendations, and so you were able to go down to about 50% with your tennis courts and your volleyball and your basketball. And so we've been continuing to monitor that. And then at your last meeting and discussing it, we completely reopened tennis. So that's back at full capacity. And we're continuing to monitor the other two. Ron can talk more about that. Statewide, we are in the phase 1 of the state's reopening, which means gyms, libraries, and museums are open to 50%. Retail and restaurants have increased from 25 to 50% capacity. Barbershops and hair salons are now reopened this week. Professional sporting events are allowed in phase 1. Schools still must adhere to distance learning. Nursing homes are closed to visitors. As of Saturday, within the state, across all counties and cities, there were 29,608 test results that came back. Of those, 1,174 were positive, with 9 new deaths. And so that is the an update for you so that you're not having a discussion in a bubble. And I'm going to ask Ron to come and sit with you and talk to you about the GBSA's request, which is that the mayor and council considering allowing your baseball and softball practices to resume. So Ron, you want to come up?
Council, it's good to see you again.
You too.
Mr. Long. Mr. Long.
Thank you for coming.
No problem. The request before you jumps from GBSA, of course, but it also merits consideration for the other groups that practice within the park. We have other organizations besides GBSA who use our park, notably Wade Baseball, which is a independent travel team that has 4 age groups that play. It would be seemingly inappropriate to consider allowing GBSA to participate in the park or have access to the park at the level that we're talking about here without extending that same opportunity. All of the caveats that are described in my memo would apply to all of the teams that would be practicing, any of the groups that would be practicing in the park. Rather than go down and recite this to you, are there any questions or any specifics that specific questions that you might have regarding these practices?
Are we getting any pushback from the community, anybody?
The community's anxious to get started. The community's very anxious to get started, and get back. The information that we're receiving from families is that, and GBSA is that they hope to be able to start practices immediately and then with an eye on possibly resuming games the very 1st of June. playing baseball, that's going to be more family time, and hopefully, folks will be able to vacation some together in the month of July. So they're really looking toward the month of June as being their shortened season.
Ron, would you just, maybe just review for the public, some of these guidelines that will be in place?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If council considers approval of this, the park staff will close the dugouts and we will remove the spectator, bleachers. That will encourage, and remember, we're talking about practices. We're not, at this point, I'm not asking for permission to hold games. I'm only talking about practices. There'll be a typically rostered team of 12 individuals and 3 coaches on the field for a total of 15 people on the field. Of course, parents and grandparents and family members like to come to the practices, so we will remove the spectator bleachers, and it would be the responsibility of the host organization to manage and monitor compliance for their guests, for their participants and for their guests. GBSA would need to staff that and have a responsible individual there to supervise that and make sure that people were maintaining appropriate social distancing.
And I would assume with the removal of the bleachers, that those people bring chairs.
Exactly.
And so they can sit
Exactly.
far enough apart. Okay.
The dugouts will be closed so that you know, obviously there's not 6 foot of distance between 12 kids inside of one dugout. You know, so the dugouts would be closed. There would be no concessions offered. The restrooms would be open, for use during those practices. The city's, housekeeping concessionaire would be called on to clean and sanitize those restrooms nightly. The cost of that, the associated cost, would be going back to GBSA or the other organizations that, you know, Wade Baseball, whoever, would be paying it, and they would pay the cost of the housekeeping until such time as we open the parks back up to the general public.
Mhm.
And would that be a contractor that would be doing that cleaning?
Yes.
So like Rush Riders Company, something like that?
Exactly.
So they would take care, they would take
Exactly.
care.
And field lighting would be available, making the fields available till the 9 o'clock curfew hour.
Okay. Right, and I believe, in speaking with one of the coaches today, they said that usually there would be 1 or 2 team members absent. And so that takes the number down even more during a practice time. And that they were planning that the coaches and whoever they assign would be vigilant in terms of following the protocol guidelines that are set up by law.
Would you expect a follow-on request to move it from practice to regular games? Or?
Yes, sir, I do. I expect them to, request the opportunity to begin games on June 1st. I don't have that formal request, but I know it's.
And that would be next council meeting, then we have to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, good, we have some good tracking time, you know, in between. Leslie, do we have any, public comments or questions?
No, you're not receiving anything on the time.
Okay, all right. Council, do we have a motion? Or conversation? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any, other questions or discussion, for Ron?
That's a good point.
Can we go ahead and approve the game starting time now without, unless there's hiccups or anything? Is that something we could?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to amend my motion so that we go ahead and approve the June 1st starting time too,
For games.
for games.
All right. Do we have a second for that? Okay,
Sorry.
all right, so we have our amended motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions from council? All right, hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, passes 5-0.
Thank you so much, and happy ball players.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, Ron. All right, if at this time, we will go back to our original, action item A, and that's the approval of the subrecipient restore grant agreement with Santa Rosa County. And that will be Samantha.
Thank you. Representing a little more than 150 pages of your agenda
Yes.
this evening would be what happens when you accept federal money. And, Council, you have been working as a sub-grantee with Santa Rosa County on this project, which will benefit 163 residential lots within the South Santa Rosa utility area outside the city limits for more than 4 years. And so this was the multi-year implementation plan #1 that you get so much correspondence on. And there are 2 items in the agenda this evening. #1 is the subrecipient restore agreement. This has been thoroughly reviewed by staff and by the city attorney, but you know, it is what it is, essentially. We look to make sure that there isn't any unnecessary risks, liabilities or exposures, you know, to the city. But at the end of the day, if you want the money, this is the way that it is crafted. And so for that reason, we do recommend approval. And I do want to say that this first phase of the project, which is the survey and design and permitting of the project, will receive a grant appropriation of $415,000. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Leslie, do we have any public comments or questions on this?
No, ma'am, I've not received any.
All right, thank you. Council, do we have a motion?
For approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. All right, now we'll move down to action item C, which is related to our previous action item. Samantha?
Yes, this is the authorization to advertise for design, and that of course will be reviewed by staff and the results brought back to the council. So staff recommends approval.
All right. Any public comments or questions?
No, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
All right, a second?
Second.
And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions from council? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, passes 5-0. Action item D is the sale of .08 acres of Tiger Point Golf Course at Ganges Trails. Samantha?
Thank you. Mayor and Council, 8 months ago, Mr. Bontrager at 1162 Ganges Trail requested to purchase .08 acres of property that's adjacent to his own. It's an area that he currently maintains with landscaping. You can see in the attached pictures. It is just of de minimis value to the city's utility. We do not irrigate in that area. However, there is a golf cart path that runs parallel to this area. So staff did recommend that a 1-foot easement be retained along the northern boundary of the property. The recommendation went to the South Santa Rosa utility. They have reviewed it. They have recommended approval. This is one of those items that, because it was not assigned a high priority and we continue to work with the property owner, it's just been on the books and we work towards it. But now, as we are looking at the bigger picture, it's important that we go ahead and resolve this out of consideration of the property owner. He did pay for the survey and for an appraisal. And so we do appreciate that. The 2 appraisals, one being from the city, one being from the property owner, came in at an average price of $11,200. But in consideration of the value of the easement, staff recommends a purchase price of $7,000. And again, the public interest here would be that the homeowner continues to maintain this property. I've been by, physically inspected it. Mary Jane, I know Mayor Fitch has as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right.
One
Yes,
point
yes.
of clarification, the city will retain 1 foot from the edge of the golf cart, over toward the property line, so and then the easement will go another foot into the property, so in essence, there will be 2 feet of, property on the side and on the edge of the golf cart, path that even as a card.
That is a good point, and also, Mary Jane, you reminded me right before the meeting that in the recommendation, if the recommendation, could be expanded to say that the council approve and authorize the mayor to sign the sales agreement, and all closing documents. Additionally, just, I guess, point of clarification, should the council also declare the property as surplus within this motion?
Yes, they should.
And so if you would approve that expanded motion as Jack just described.
And then as the city manager described, it's really of no benefit to the city and therefore does well.
All right, so who would like to make this motion or amend it?
Move for approval as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the motion is presented. All in favor? Oh, do we have public comment or questions?
No, ma'am, no public comment.
All right.
I just wanted to clarify as presented and amended.
It amended, I would say. Is it amended?
No, I don't think so, because the original motion was to, approve, the recommendation as stated in the agenda and, in addition to authorizing the signature of the sales contract with purchase agreement, that it would authorize the mayor to sign the closing documents as necessary and declare the property.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right.
That's a quick question, where does the money go?
To the South Monroe Utility Fund.
Tom gets
Yeah.
I have a question.
it. Get his haircut finally, that's what we.
I get my haircut every day.
Okay, hearing no opposition, right? We have 5-0, okay, and motion passes. All right, now we are down to, action item B, which is the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget calendar. And we have received copies of the proposed calendar. Do we have any comments or questions?
Ma'am, I've not received that.
Okay. All right, so at this time, Samantha, if you wanna
Yes.
talk to us about that a minute.
Mayor and council, the city clerk has prepared, the calendar in consultation with the finance department and department heads who are already well underway with preparing their budget this year. You know, as always, as you're working, through your budget workshops, we move at your pace. And so this is not, you know, written in stone, you know, and, I think I'm looking to see if Leslie's notes remained. I think she did have notes about which ones kind of took a little bit longer last year. So we may alter as we go, but we would like for you to just go ahead and conceptually let us know that these dates work for you. In addition to the budget work sessions, which would begin with the first on July 20th, you've also discussed the need for additional work sessions. One, for you to review your paving plan. Because that is its own separate issue, we have new project managers. We've talked to you about the reorganization that you've approved for the Development Services Division. I think it's important for those project managers to come answer any questions you have about the prioritization of those roads. Also, it sounded from your discussion like you might consider using more of your reserves for a more aggressive approach. And so how, you know, to do that, I think it really necessitates a work session. And then secondly, the underground utilities. And so we have 2 dates that we would propose, June 1st and June 15th. And that would just be, you know, an hour before your regular meeting. So if there's any objections, you know, please let us know if there's a date on here that you absolutely know would not be available.
Those are at 3, right?
Yes, 5:30 is regular council meeting. Yes, thank you, at 3. I was thinking 4:30, I needed to look down and read the paper. 3 o'clock.
I was saying, I think we're gonna need more time than an hour, but yeah, that makes sense.
Leslie do. All right, so, any questions or comments regarding that? And Leslie, anything from the public?
And they have not received any.
All right, do we have a motion to accept this
approval.
calendar? Thank
Do
you.
we need one?
A second. We don't,
Yeah, it's more just conceptually,
Housekeeping.
yes.
okay.
I just want to ask, you know, going into the new budget session, going into 2021. And then from there, take a look at the different pieces of the puzzle, and that way, I don't know for the rest of the team, but at least for me, it would give me a better sense as to how tight do we need to squeeze, or how open can we be for things like additional paving or whatever the opportunity is.
So part of my job requirement is to provide you with a balanced budget.
Right.
And so that is customarily what I'm used to doing, is at that first workshop, giving you, based on our discussions year-long and your strategic, priorities, here is our understanding of what would make a balanced budget. And then from that, of course, your enterprises stand on their own as their own individual budgets. That historically has not been the way that the city has done it, and so I had to kind of reprogram myself. And so I'm absolutely capable of doing it that way and bringing you a balanced budget, and then you can kind of tweak and go from there.
We could have
Yeah.
told the other school center, I want you
A little more conservative, like,
Approach too.
Yeah.
approach. Yeah. Totally.
Sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And there's not any one right way or wrong way to do it. I just kind of shared that with you to say that, in the end, I have to provide you with a balanced budget, because that's my report card. So I can do it at the beginning or at the end.
Yeah, no, I like that, we haven't done it that way, I think that would be a good way, a good way to start and see how it goes. Okay. All right, so that's good with you.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any new business?
No, I did, not new business, at the council's pleasure, I did just want to give you a very quick recap of your small business grant program.
Okay.
And just to say that the Small Business Development Center does recommend closing of the program based on the fact that the applications have slowed. But ultimately, there were approved 13 businesses, with a total of $32,500.
All right, any questions, discussion about that? Okay.
I had one customer, the Lowe's restaurant, Custom Grill. He had, I think, a little over the minimum number of employees, I think it was 20.
Yes.
It was on the application, but all of his employees are basically all part-timers. They didn't really have full-time employees, but it's, he might have 23 or 24 or something like that. Part-time employees, and it's like he kind of got fell through the cracks on that. I mean, he could have used help. I know he was suffered pretty dramatically from the loss as well. I was wondering, noticed that things might be coming about maybe helping some of the ones that maybe, they tried to, and if they couldn't because of things like that.
Yeah, and I think that Samantha had followed up on a couple of others that were different reasons that qualified.
Yeah.
But, and was going to basically ask if we had, could get the list. He didn't, and so we could kind of look at it, but they're ready to kind of close the door on that, aren't they?
They are, they're moving to their next, grant program for relief, for stimulus, and so the Small Business Development Center has closed their books.
Just
But
out of curiosity, out of the 13 that got approved, how many applied?
So I asked for that information, and the SBDC declined to provide it. And so, I shared that with Shannon Ogletree with Economic, Development Office. So I was a bit surprised by that. Their response is that they did not keep a record as the requests came in. They looked to see which were inside the city, and those that weren't were funneled to the county's grant program. So they would have to go back through the counties to see, to compile a list. I was, quite frankly, that wasn't the surprise I was looking for. I specifically replied back and said the council asked the question because they would like to see if they should alter what some of the grant eligibility is to see if they can help a greater number of businesses.
Right.
But the SBDC wants to reallocate their staff resources for a new round of stimulus. And so I was not able to get that information from them. And I might be able to get the full list countywide from them and just do the process of elimination. But any of those who applies, just the one that you described, Councilman Aber, I'd be happy to follow up on personally and see what the issue was, because I don't think that we delineated between county employees. So there may be something else, but if that's the case, then maybe if the book is still a little cracked open, we can work with that. So I'll be
Just
happy to
trying to
help.
help as many small businesses and
Sure.
cities as we could, and I didn't see very many of the names that I turned on to the program, and I just didn't know how many actually succeeded versus, well, we know how many succeeded, but how many failed to meet the requirements, just to see how good of a success rate we might have.
I want to bring you a full report at your next meeting. We, at the invitation of the county, took this approach, partnering with SBDC. Being that we are already a tax exempt entity with our own finance department and our own CRA, it may be something that bears relooking at. And so I want to bring you a better report next week.
It might be more fair to look at it as an FTE.
Yeah.
Type thing rather than part-time, full-time, just round it out to this many.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of you, that's a great idea.
I was a little surprised, I would have thought we would have filled the whole thing, and the total number we could have helped.
I know, understood. All right, anything else for, discussion? Okay, do we have, any public comments?
No, ma'am, I've not received anything.
All right, council comments, I think we're up for that, or any other questions before we hit the council comments? Any update on our, sale of Kaiser Point?
The contract, our draft contract was completed, on Friday of last week. The, buyer has not, at that point, at least, had not retained an attorney, so, what we did, my office did send the contract and the affluent disposal agreement draft to our broker, and my understanding is the broker, provided it to the, prospective buyer in a year. You know, I assume he will be retaining an attorney, and that then we would work with his attorney to come to a final agreement that we can put back to council.
Do we have any time frame as far as response? I don't know about commercial, I don't know.
We did not, I don't know whether the broker would do anything on it, but there was nothing, again, we just prepared the draft contracts.
So, okay.
It's going to stay listed until at least the
My understanding, yes, I mean, you know, we can always entertain another offer if another one was to come in, so, I don't think that there's been any agreement at this point, to take it off.
Correct.
We don't have.
Maybe just on the ring.
Can we still do that after they do it? Like to check for 200,000?
You know, there are consequences once your contract goes, that's where money goes hard, so to speak, but there are different deadlines within an agreement like this. You can always entertain another offer, but again, the further down the road you got, there may be consequences based upon the purchase agreement if that has been signed.
Yeah, the purpose of the question was exposure, not to really seek other offers in between, because in case something happened, then we had to minimize our exposure for sale.
I'm not sure, but is
No.
that a question?
No.
No, we still are open to,
But
anyone else who
I
wants to come in and make.
that wasn't the purpose of my question.
Okay.
It was just to make sure that we keep the exposure.
All right. I think we're up for council comments. Mr. Adair, we'll start with you.
None at this time, thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Was it this week the county commissioners were looking at the 45-acre sale?
The 28th.
One more. One more week or two. All right, Mr. Porter.
Just had, a couple of quick things. Is our library open?
Yes,
Okay,
this week.
okay. And, I wanted to ask Rob, but I didn't want to hold him up from his meeting. If you don't know, I'll just catch up with him. We've opened the tennis. What about the basketball? Is that?
The basketball is still at half capacity.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are the, I'll get the rules for that. Okay. And then the short. Outside.
Meaning the outside, I know there's, it's very popular.
We have a nice gym. Why would we want to play?
Right.
All right. And then the shoreline attendant, do you know how long we're going to keep that going?
as we're requiring the park attendants, right now, because the rec center is closed, we have service workers, which is manual labor, that is essential, that's an essential job function. And so, assistants had a choice. They could, be transferred and be a service worker, in which case they're going to be doing manual labor, park monitoring, and boat ramp attendant, depending on the schedule. Some of our recreation assistants were not not comfortable with the physical labor. And so they declined the position and we laid them off. And so there are some part-time recreation assistants who are currently laid off. When the recreation center opens back up, they also will be the first that we call. But for the time being, we also look at those service workers, the benefit to the city is that when you see that park monitor who's driving around and communicating with people's CDC recommendations, just a few days later, they're also helping maintain our right-of-ways. And so we are getting the added benefit of being able to redeploy some of those employees right now.
Mr. Slater?
So, I know Ron was saying that when they open up the ballparks, the sports association is going to oversee and pay the extra money for the restrooms to be serviced.
Understand that we're talking, this is such a fluid situation, we're talking about today, right? And so as of today, our restrooms are not open. The only reason why they would be open is for the use of the sports association. And that would be the reason why they would pay that cost, because it's for their sole use. Once we, open back up and, our recreation centers open and our restrooms are open, then obviously we wouldn't expect them to pay that cost because it's open for all the benefit of the public.
Okay, that's not what my question was. So my question is that we have our boat ramps open, are the restrooms open down there?
No.
And so we have basketball and tennis court, but the restrooms aren't open there?
No.
Is there any way that we could look at what the cost would be to maintain those bathrooms during this little window of time? To allow, we have a lot of boat ramp people going down there, hundreds a weekend and.
It isn't the cost, it isn't about stepping up disinfecting, it is that our pandemic plan is coordinated with the county. And so the county has not opened up their restrooms, and so we're communicating, we had a 4 o'clock meeting with their emergency management, ours every Monday, we're communicating with, the city of Milton and Santa Rosa County. Now, could we open up the restrooms without the county doing so? Thus far, we've been in step with, every time, they reopen, we reopen as well.
So the answer is.
I would literally say like, Friday, things may change. I mean, really, because we're taking our tempo from Santa Rosa County. But at the end of the day, the city is its own sovereign authority. And so if you wanted to do something different with restrooms, I don't think we're gonna follow the law on that. Just sharing with you, it isn't.
No pun intended.
I mean, I don't think anybody would dig us for opening restrooms soon, but, it isn't a matter of cost and the janitorial services are at the ready. It's just that right now our playgrounds are not open, our recreation center is not open, outdoor basketball is still at, 50%, same as volleyball. So we are trying to do a measured approach and just, within a week or two, that could very well change.
I do think JB makes a good point about particularly the boat ramp, because there's tons of people,
Yeah, they're going to the bathroom somewhere.
Well, very
They really need to.
I'm sure they're going home.
Yeah, I don't think they're going.
Well, there may be tons of people down there, but they're on the water. They are not at our park. And so I do want to clarify that, there's a lot of vehicles, they are on the water.
I understand, but as they come back in and.
Yeah.
All
So you only want to go down there when the tide's.
Yeah, that's right. Does any thought about the summer camp program for the kids? Has there been any discussion about that, if that's gonna happen? It's a big part of the working community it's been really strained with, families and all this. I was just curious.
I received, a mixed reaction from staff a month ago when we talked about whether to have a summer program at all. And so I really need to look to see before I can ask council to make a policy decision, whether, you know, the staffing, would be there.
Because I know that it looks like from what I understand, the elementary school is gonna have their latchkey program in the summer thing, starting the 1st of June, last I heard, but, and I know you're saying we're doing things in kind of,
Yes.
in a balance with that, so I was just curious if that was gonna be, offered, for the community.
Pensacola has said June 15th, they are going to open their rec centers, and so I've asked Ron Foley to get with his staff so that I can report back to you, and if we can, think similarly. But I'm not prepared right now to ask you to make a policy decision on that one way or the other, because I really need to sit down with our staff and make sure they're comfortable with it. Our recreation assistants, when you're asking them to be around, children, it's a big ask, and, we should be able to make sure we can provide reliable care.
That's all I have.
Alright. And I have just a couple of things, just a reminder that this Friday and Saturday, from 12 to 4, we're gonna dedicate our tribute park for, this year's senior class. So if you have the opportunity, come by sometime during that time and see it. Samantha sent, her photos out this afternoon, an email, I think, to all of us, right?
It was a tester, so it will go out this evening to the rest of the council.
But it's,
That's it.
yeah, it is a, great piece of the bridge that, they have, sent over to us and will be unloading somehow soon before Friday. I think Wednesday is the day for that. And, so it's gonna be an awesome thing. And, Sam has kind of renamed the hill on Shoreline as Lookout Point. So, that's how we're describing it as far as people finding it. And there'll be some direction on where to park and all that. So it should be like, a great afternoon. So well planned. And then the other thing, Friday and Saturday, 12 to 4.
This is for the seniors to paint their names, because we can't have too many at one time.
Yeah, we're being, very careful. And then the other thing was I did ride along of the golf course the other day. So if any of you haven't done that, it's well worth the time. Jason went, and then Trey from the golf course sort of took me around. And so it was real interesting just looking at that from a different perspective than I had been around before. And they're very willing and able to do that at their convenience. So if you have a chance, it'll be, I think, an interesting thing to do. I found it enlightening just to see it all at once with where we are now. So, okay, that's it. And we're adjourned.